So kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to everyone that is here to this webinar on admission, in particular the Certificate of Character process. We're lucky today to have two speakers from NZLS, David Wiley and Danny Maynell, who you can see on your screen, who have come to speak to prof students about this process and tips and tricks and things you need to think about when you're planning admission, which is obviously the goal for a lot of us. Before they jump into their presentation today, a couple of housekeeping tips from college. We've also got in attendance, they're not currently on your screen, but three other of my College of Law colleagues, Alison Wallace, Terry Talentire, and Nick Curran, who are in attendance today. You might hear from them as the presentation proceeds. And I just want to shout out quickly a special thank you to Nick for pulling this all together and making this available to everyone. It's a lot of work that goes into these webinars, and I appreciate all of his support with that. We are recording this session today, so please just keep that in mind. If you're not comfortable with having your camera on, if you're an attendee, you're not being recorded. But if you do raise a question later, if you're not comfortable having your camera on, please turn that off. And the recording will be made available to those who registered for the event but aren't able to attend. The presentation today is half an hour of slides, and then we will have half an hour for Q&A afterwards. And we do have on your screen, you should see down the bottom a Q&A function. So not the chat function, but a specific question and answer function. So if you've got questions as we go through, put them into there and we'll answer them in that Q&A section at the end. So I hand over now to David, and thank you again for your attendance today, David, and your support with this.
That's perfectly right. Thank you so much for having me. Firstly, my name is David Wiley. I am the registry team leader here in Auckland for the New Zealand Law Society. My team specifically handles admissions and certificate of character process. So hopefully I will have a presentation and answer any and all questions you may have. If I don't, please pop in the chat or give a call or email through to your local Law Society branch if there's anything I didn't cover or you want to know more about. So, with that, I hope my presentation is being shared and you can all see a big blue screen saying admission.
Yes, we can see that, David. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so the admission process. This presentation is going to be two parts. The first is the admission steps, which will be short and sharp of what you need to do to get to file at the High Court. And that's your step for admission. That's the important bit. The second part, and that will be the major part I will cover, is the Certificate of Character application. That is the Law Society's responsibility in this process. And that's generally where a lot more questions crop up. So I will go through in quite some detail over all the hurdles and common mistakes and missteps we see in that process. So the High Court. To be admitted, you must be done through the High Court. This can be done through any High Court across the country, and you have the right to practice in any area in the country through any High Court. The Auckland High Court does have capacity issues. It is the most common court wherever over half the country's admittees get done each year. So they have limited capacity, and that capacity is at the discretion of the High Court registrar. Generally, they have space up to around about 150 per admission day. The only time where it does get quite tight is around the July and September area. So that is generally when people start completing their studies, completing their profs, and there's always this burst of people coming in to be admitted at around about the same time. Do not worry if you do not get into the High Court or the Auckland High Court turn your way. Your Certificate of Character is valid still and can be used at any High Court across the country. Coming to what you need for that admission, moving counsel. You will need a practicing lawyer to move your application for admission. As part of the ceremony on the day and lodging your application, They are practicing lawyers who vouch for you that you are an honourable person to be a solicitor and barrister of the High Court. Moving counsel is a voluntary position, so please start making connections with someone to be your moving counsel. Their whole role is described on our website, and there is links throughout this PowerPoint, which I'm sure we can make available to you through the College of Law, all these links. One thing you can have is if you know a lawyer, family member, who used to be a practicing lawyer but aren't at the moment, they can apply to the Law Society for a temporary practicing certificate to be a lawyer for that one day to move your application. And they would just need to make that application to the Law Society for that temporary practice certificate. If you're having trouble finding moving counsel, the Auckland Women Lawyers Association website has a register of moving counsel and volunteers who, if available, are happy to be moving counsel. So have a look at that. There's several in the Auckland area and other places around the country. Documents for admission. So the required documents for admission are on the New Zealand Law Society website, but these are the documents that the High Court require. We have templates on the Law Society website, so that's available for you, but the documents you require for the admission are, or the prerequisites are your certificate of character, which will come from the New Zealand Law Society, your receipt for admission, paying the admission fee, that will also come from the New Zealand Law Society, and it's kind of included in your fee for the certificate of character. The third thing you will need is a certificate of completion. That comes from the New Zealand Council of Legal Education. That is separate from the New Zealand Law Society. They are the ones in charge of your legal education side. So it's kind of a separation of power between New Zealand Law Society and New Zealand Council of Legal Education. So all those templates that you need to file for the High Court are on the New Zealand Law Society website on our admissions page. The LA1, LA2, or LA3, depending on your situation, and the LA4 or 5, depending on your situation. They are all templated and require some editing. But however, moving counsel or the Law Society can help guide you on that if you require it. So the one thing I didn't mention there is when you go to file your application with the High Court, you will be required to pay a court fee that is separate from your admission fee. A court filing fee is paying for the court's time, not for the certificate of character or admission fee. There are no restrictions on filing. You just need to file on time with the High Court's guidelines. They can be lenient with some of those timeframes. You just need to be in communication with them or make contact with them so that they know. Your certificate of character is valid for 3 months when it's from the date it's issued. That would be your only restriction of time for making sure you file your application at the High Court. Your certificate of character must be valid on the day of admission. All right. Speaking of the certificate of character, we will go through that application now. Like I said, this is quite a high overview. We will be looking at some of the key mistakes, important pieces of information to note throughout this application. It is probably the most time-consuming application you'll make in the admission process part. So important points to note on the certificate of character. Application documents must be dated no earlier than 3 months prior to the date of the certificate of character is issued. What that means is your application has a lifespan of 3 months from the time it is signed, and your certificate of character will need to be issued in that space of that 3 months. If it's not, we'll require you to refile a refreshed or updated application form. Your certificate of character is valid for 3 months from the date it's issued. and it must be valid on the day of admission. If you require a new certificate, the application process may need to be repeated, including payment. So please, be certain of the date you want to be admitted, and then make sure that you can obtain all the required documents. Your certificate of character receipt will be provided at the same time as your certificate of character. This is the receipt. It is the tax invoice, but it's the receipt that reflects you paid your admission fee. So it's one of the three precursor elements for your admission documents. So the High Court will need to have evidence of. You usually apply to the New Zealand Law Society branch in the city of where you intend to be admitted for your certificate of character. So what that means is if you're looking to be admitted in the Auckland High Court, you apply to the Auckland branch of the New Zealand Law Society. If you're looking to be admitted in Tauranga High Court, you apply to the Waikato Bay of Plenty branch. And that applies across the country. The reason we have that is while your certificate issued from any branch is valid at any high court, the branches usually have close relationships with their local courts and make quite a few arrangements specifically to their area or have communication over limits and numbers going through so the court can adequately plan for the day. When to file for a certificate of character. When you're doing your professional studies, you may have an idea of when your professional studies or prof course will be completed. Once you've got that completion date in mind, have a look at our admissions page on our website to get a general idea of where to apply. There is the admission timeline, which I've got on the right-hand side of the page there. So you're usually looking to apply for your certificate of character about 16 weeks before your admission ceremony. One thing not mentioned in that timeline is your completion of profs should be around about 12 weeks before your intended admission date. So if you've got your profs completion date in mind, look at around about 12 weeks ahead of that to work out what your admission date should roughly be. The rule of thumb that we use to work that out is you should be looking to complete your profs around about 2 weeks after applications close with the branch. So our admission dates, applications open with a branch for usually 3 weeks. So it's roughly 2 weeks after applications close. Your prof's completion date should be no later than. A certified copy of your ID. You will need to provide a certified copy of your photo ID, whether it be a current passport or New Zealand driver's license. The driver's license must show its expiry date, so it must be both front and back of your driver's license. And it must have the correct wording, which is might have been bumped down to page 2 or 3 now, but it's words to the effect of, I certify this to be a true copy of the original, which I have cited, and the photo represents the true likeness of the individual. Often justice of the peace or lawyers may certify that it's a true copy, but they don't get that second element of the certification that it's a true likeness of yourself. If that is missed, we may ask you to recertify or redo your driver's license or ID. Your certificate of completion. When your professional legal studies course is complete, you must also obtain your certificate of completion from the New Zealand Council of Legal Education. This is a document required as one of the 3 precursor requirements for admission. That is issued by the New Zealand Council of Legal Education, and that is not New Zealand Law Society. that can take up to 40 working days for them to process. However, they do have a fast track option for the certificate of completion at an extra cost. The New Zealand Law Society does not provide that for the certificate of character. There is no fast track option for the certificate of character. If you have any questions on your certificate of completion, I would recommend contacting the New Zealand Council of Legal Education. They will be able to walk you through anything of that. Like I said earlier, they look after the legal education side of admission. We look after the character side. So there's the separation of powers between the two organisations. So our COC application, sorry, may say COC often. It is Certificate of Character. It's an abbreviation. But common mistakes we see when completing your form. And we may go back to you with more questions or for you to redo parts of your application. Jumping straight to section 6, the first few sections are all your name and ID and name and address, which I would hope you would get correct. So section 6 are tertiary qualifications. This is a section in which you must list all the tertiary institutions you have attended, even if you did not complete your degree or qualification with them. This includes exchange courses overseas universities. The New Zealand Law Society will make inquiries with all the institutions you have attended. Overseas universities, New Zealand Law Society may provide you with a letter to send to that overseas institution to return back to the New Zealand Law Society. What we are asking with regards to this is if there have been any cases of academic misconduct or instances of integrity that may affect your character that we should be aware of. Your professional legal studies. Please do not submit your application unless you have completed your studies course or due to finish within 2 weeks of the close of your application. If you do, it may create delays and it may be a risk that your certificate may not be issued in time for your intended admission date. There is some leeway, but it is all within reason and at potentially your own risk. If you're outside of the time frame that we want for that 2 weeks, we would have that conversation with you and making sure that you are willing to accept those risks. Risks are that you may miss your intended admission, you may have to file a new application and pay a new fee. So we really want people to make sure that they are at a point where they are ready to make this application and not just looking to get it done as quickly as possible because it may come at their own cost. The employment and academic history, section 8. Your timeline must go back to when you finished high school or turned 18. I know that might be some time for some older students who are looking to change careers late in life. And this timeline must include your tertiary academic history, not just your employment. So the time you spent studying as well. All months during this time need to be accounted for, so there are no gaps of more than 1 month in your timeline. And you must include all roles, including any voluntary roles. If you do not have enough space on the application form, please just add another Word document to extend that with all the information we require. And we do have an example of what we like to see with our timeframes. So this is every month is being accounted for. There are no gaps and any time unemployed or traveling is accounted for. So there are no gaps of more than 1 month. I'll just let people read that and understand that for a minute. All right. First big section, a fit and proper person. Sorry, just to answer someone's question there. So if you have been an older student and this isn't your first career, yes, if you are, say, 60, you would have to go all the way back to age 18 as best you can. A fit and proper section. A fit and proper person is something that will come up in every year of being a lawyer. You must make a declaration each year that you are still a fit and proper person. So if you tick yes to any of our fit and proper questions, we will require supporting information and a statement of your account of what happened during your application of your instance. If you tick yes to any of the fit and proper questions, it is not necessarily a barrier to joining the legal profession. It is not the nail in the coffin that you will never be a lawyer. It is not something to be afraid of. So there is a lot of information on that. Likewise, one of the questions that we are required to law, all the fit and proper questions are required by law in the legislation, including declaring any health conditions. We have a guide on our website of what health conditions we would like to declare. Mostly they are things that are reoccurring and ongoing, opposed to one-off instances of anxiety or small instances. So the guiding principle in our fit and proper person declarations is that you should be open and honest with us. It is better that you disclose any instances of academic misconduct, criminal convictions, or anything with us, opposed to us finding out alternatively. Obviously, it is a good sign of character, and that is the underpinning line of the certificate of character application, that it's a good sign of character that you take account and are open and honest with the regulator, that being us. So we also ask that if you do make any declarations for a fit and proper, so if you have to tick yes for any of those questions, that you please discuss those with your referees. It is a good sign of character if your referees can speak to any disclosures you have to make and they still stand by you. So that's why we would ask you, please, if you make any fit and proper declarations, please have that discussion with your referees. Your referees know you better than what we do on paper. They are your source of truth that you are a fit and proper person. So just going into some of the examples of what a fit and proper declarations are. So there are things like bankruptcy. Bankruptcy may not apply to everyone, but we would look to see that you have all the information there from the official assignee and everything like that, that we know the circumstances that led to the bankruptcy, what you've learned following that. Academic misconduct, if you've had any instances of academic misconduct from plagiarism to unauthorized collaboration, we would ask that you please declare that with us. We do make inquiries with your tertiary institutions, which I mentioned earlier, including your providers. Criminal convictions. So criminal convictions are only cases that have been to court and a conviction has been entered. What doesn't constitute as a criminal conviction is anything that has been cleared by a clean slate. They are minor charges or convictions that are over 7 years old and are wiped by clean slate. Speeding tickets and infringements, they are infringements, they are not convictions, so they don't count. If you are spoken to by police and, say, for instance, diversion was granted, no conviction was entered. If you were given a discharge without conviction through the official courts, again, no conviction was entered. There's no requirement for you to disclose that to us. We do, again, say to everyone, open and honest is always the best approach, and giving us the full information of your character, and how much weight we choose to give that at that point is once we have the full application before us, we can make that assessment. Other cases of fit and proper question or person's questions is if you've ever been found of misconduct with other regulators, whether it be the real estate agents authority, an overseas authority, or any other regulator that where you may have been registered profession and had some form of misconduct with them. Like I alluded to a little earlier, with declaring medical conditions, what we would expect for people to declare there is anything that is ongoing and reoccurring. If it's a one-off instance of anxiety during exams, for instance, we wouldn't expect anything. But what we would like to see if in those instances, if you do need to declare anything with us, is we would like to know what sort of support you have in place, how well you know any of your triggers that may affect or exacerbate your condition. What we want to know is that you have it under control and well managed, and you have the support there. What the Law Society is looking to do is we want to make sure that you are looking after yourself. We recognise that stress and personal well-being in the legal profession is high on our agenda, and we want to make sure everyone comes into the profession well. On our website, we also have a whole section on practicing well and some of the options and availables to all our members if they ever should need it. Fit and proper questions. I know they are quite unique and individual to your situation, so please, I am happy to discuss your individual circumstances at one point. This is just kind of a high-level overview at this stage. And I will say, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your local Law Society branch and they can discuss it with you as well. Right. Overseas request for criminal conviction history. If you have lived in another country for more than 12 months consecutively since the age of 18, we will require a certificate of criminal conviction history from that country. So what that means, it is a few parts or elements that we need to meet there. So you must be in that country for more than 12 months and consecutively. If you just go on holiday there every 6 months and come back, that we do not require that. But if you are there for living there consecutively, we will require that. Often we find that if people who have immigrated to New Zealand is the main ones right there. There are some special circumstances with individual countries. The USA, for instance, you will need an FBI report, which is a national report, and the state police check, which is the state you were living in, because they are different databases and cover different jurisdictions. If you have any questions on needing anything, again, reach out to your local New Zealand Law Society branch, or I can answer that at the end of this presentation. The authority to inquire and consent to publish name. So section 14, this is the second to last section of our application form. We do require you to sign this. This gives us the authority to make inquiries, give your name to the Ministry of Justice and work with you to provide the criminal history. This is our authority to make sure we can advertise for your name. We can inquire with your PROS provider and the Ministry of Justice. If you have any questions or concerns regarding that, please contact us. And swearing your application. So this has come up quite recently. So please do not have a referee or employer swear your application. Under the Lawyers and Conveyancers Act, under the Client Conduct and Client Care Rules, they should not be swearing your application as they have a clear conflict of interest and interest in you. So this is more on the person swearing your application. not on you as the applicant, but they should not be swearing your application because they have a conflict with you. If they do have a clear conflict, we will ask you to re-swear your application, which can be time-consuming and slow down the process. But this is a client care rule that the person swearing your application should be aware of. And payment. The application fee is $288.65, including GST. Obviously, if you do not pay the fee, you will not get your certificate and you will not get your receipt. So that's pretty obvious. To swear your application, you can have a JP or any solicitor of the New Zealand High Court. A solicitor is barrister of the High Court is or should sign a declaration or application or swear an oath if they are not biased or have an interest in the case. Rule 4.6 will go through all of the instances where they should not be swearing that oath. Right, a second big one. This is where we get most of our questions, is the reference requirements for the certificate of character. So the minimum requirements for references is your current employer, so one current employer. Yes, a JP can swear at the application. Two general referees, they are people who have known you for at least 5 years and can speak to your character. And in any instance, the New Zealand Law Society can request further references if required. So an employer reference. Who would we expect from an employer reference? We would expect the person providing an employer reference be your supervisor or manager, someone who has your day-to-day responsibility for you and your work. In some instances, a senior human resources or HR official can provide a reference, as long as they have direct knowledge of your work and are closely involved in your supervision. If you have a reference from your current employer, please do not provide additional references from your work colleagues unless they are closely involved in your supervision or know you well outside of work, such as from high school or a sports team. If you're having difficulty finding any suitable referees with regards to the employer reference, please contact us and we will work through with that. If you are not currently employed, think about your previous employer, if they may be able to provide a reference. Also think about how long you have been employed with that employer, if they can give you a quality reference. If you've only been with them for a couple of weeks, they may not know you well enough to provide that reference. Preferred general referees. So when thinking about your general referees, the two minimum requirements that a general referee can be is that they must have known you for at least 5 years and know you well enough to speak to your character and personal qualities. That is the minimum requirement. Some of these questions may help you think about who a preferred referee may be. So there are people who have gone through a character or criminal conviction check before attaining their own position in a role. Do they belong to a profession where issues of conduct or professional standards are regulated? Are they in a role that is well respected in their community or consulted by members of a larger community? And ultimately, do they know you in a personal capacity and are able to speak to your character? Why we say that is, while you may know or have a doctor or a real estate agent, if they act for you in a professional sense, they may not know you in a personal capacity. So that's where we want you to know about your character, not as you as a client. So examples of people who are considered preferred referees: lawyers, someone who has a current practicing certificate or at least admitted to be a solicitor and barrister of the New Zealand High Court. currently registered in a different regulated profession, such as financial advisors, chartered accountants, dentists, engineers, pilots, marriage settlements, medical doctors, nurses, pilots, real estate agents, and the list goes on. Also, you have options of kamatua, members of the New Zealand Police, serving members of the armed forces, or ministers of religion. So, while these are examples of who may be considered preferred referees, these are not hard requirements. Your referee does not need to fit any of these categories. They need to fit the two minimum requirements of having known you for at least 5 years and can speak to your personal or your character and personal qualities. If you do not know anyone who is a lawyer, kamatua, or have a high standing in the community in some way or registered profession, please do not stress. What we want to see is someone who can provide us with a quality reference report that addresses your character and personal references. That is much what we would prefer over someone who you knew at university and met this one time but is currently a lawyer. What we want is someone who knows you well and not someone you just happen to know. If you're volunteering and not currently employed, yes, they 100% can provide a reference on your employer side. That's would perfectly be acceptable. So again, just reiterating my point, if you do not know anyone who is a preferred referee, a quality reference is preferred over a weak reference. We would much rather your friend from childhood who you've known since you were 6 but currently works at McDonald's over that person you met one time. There are some examples of who can't be a reference. So members of your immediate family. Obviously, they have a level of bias there, so we cannot accept them as a reference. The spouse or partner of another referee. So if your neighbours both happen to be lawyers, they both can't give you a reference on your behalf. The last one there is someone who's in a professional relationship to yourself, i.e. your personal doctor, lecturer, real estate agent, people who you pay to provide you with a service. They know you in a professional sense, not a personal sense. Other documents you will need to provide or complete with us. The criminal conviction check. Once we have accepted your application, you will receive a link from the New Zealand Ministry of Justice. And this criminal conviction check is compulsory for all applicants. So please, when you get that, or if you don't get that, please check your spam. You will need to complete some details with the Ministry of Justice directly. And please include any names you aren't previously known by or known by unofficially. So that includes a Western name if you have a Western name and not your legal name. Yes, your referees can also be your moving counsel. Moving counsel is a separate function to your certificate character referees. And please make sure you spell your names correctly when you're doing your Ministry of Justice checks. Obviously, there can be a difference between some names where one letter can make all the difference. If you do get them wrong, it may be that you need to recomplete it and it may come with an additional cost to yourself. A statutory declaration. So if your name has changed officially in any way, please provide any appropriate other documents to reaffirm this, i.e. marriage certificates, birth certificates. If you're known informally by any other names, you will need to provide a statutory declaration to explain the use of that name, where you use it, what circumstances you use it. So this is to cover any informal names or Western names you've adopted to make it easier for a Western culture to pronounce. Please make sure you include all name variations as well. So if you are known as William, but also go by Bill, please let us know. This declaration form is our standard declaration form that can be found on the government website if you Google it as well. Right, and the last thing that we acknowledge here is every application is unique, and the Law Society assesses each application on its own merits and may request more information from you if required to satisfy its regulatory obligations. So please don't compare your application to someone else's, or if we're asking you for more information over your friend, we assess each application on its own merits and the information provided. And on that note, that's the end of my presentation. So I am now open to questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, David. We'll see if questions come into the Q&A chat as we wait. I've got a couple of questions that came in before the session started on the registration form. So, oh, there we go. Let's answer that live one first. They're specifically talking about that 5-year reference requirement.
So if you're struggling to find anyone with regards to who you've known you for at least 5 years, have a think about, like I said, there's no requirements on what they need to be. They could be your childhood friends, the people you've known from high school. If you've recently moved to New Zealand and you don't have any references in New Zealand, we do accept them from overseas. So please, it's just people that have known you for 5 years. If you are still struggling with that in mind, have a conversation with your Law Society branch and we'll have a discussion more tailored to your situation and we can come up with some ideas.
Thank you. One of the questions that came through prior to the session was, do we have to apply for the first admission ceremony that we're eligible for after completing profs?
So no, you don't. So once you complete a profs, technically you have up to 10 years to be admitted before your qualifications are deemed stale.
That stale qualification requirement starts from, and correct me if I'm incorrect on this, David, but this is how we've always told students, it actually starts from when you start your LLB. The first,
correct.
Yeah, so
I should clarify that, yes.
First compulsory paper of your LLB. So you might have started your LLB in 2020, and the first compulsory paper, so property, for example, or land law, you did in 2020. That means you've got until the end of 2029, or 10 years after that, to get admitted.
Correct, but there is no rush. You've got, like I said, that good 5-10 years from completion or the start of your education. Just a couple more questions on the admission ceremonies in the High Court. So 2 parts. So admission capacities, it is a first and first served with the High Court. If they get to a point where they cannot take any more, unfortunately it will be missed out, which leads me on to the next part. So in exceptional circumstances, an application can be made to the High Court directly for a private ceremony. That's a high level to reach to have a private ceremony granted, especially in major centres, because they do have regular admission dates. However, if there are exceptional circumstances, i.e. someone is ill, may not make it to the next one or something like that, the High Court might look at the prospect of a private admission ceremony. Like I said, any High Court across the country can have an admission ceremony. So there are courts across the country that do not have advertised set schedule admission ceremonies on our website. An example of that is Whangarei High Court. Whangarei High Court takes admissions on an ad hoc basis, but they're generally very small admission ceremonies, and as it is a very small High Court. Some of the other questions that came through.
There's a question specifically around disclosure for the fitness of person questions. obviously convictions, when you've got actual disciplinary findings, for example, for academic misconduct in a tertiary education institution. But what about submitting an assignment? This is obviously a very specific scenario. Submitting an assignment without proper referencing. Does that need to be disclosed?
If the I would go back to the correspondence you had with that tertiary education provider. Um, Often they will have some wording in there that no further action or the accusation of academic misconduct was dismissed or not proceeded with. So please go back to that to check your wording. If you've had any form of written reprimand, reduction of marks, you can guarantee that there was proven academic misconduct. So I would disclose that. If you're still unsure, contact the tertiary education provider. This is your information and you have a right to access it. So you can ask them if you're entered on the academic misconduct register and they will be able to tell you.
Aligned with it, I might have actually missed this when I was typing an answer to one of the other questions, but if you had an academic issue with a different degree, not law, that still needs to be disclosed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any academic. So the theory behind it is academic misconduct plays into a question of integrity, i.e., whether it be simply cheating or plagiarizing, which is again an integrity issue. So that is the key element there. It is an integrity issue, which a lawyer is meant to be of a high standing and high level of integrity. So that's why we want to know. Comes back to your legal ethics.
Any other questions? Looks like that might be the end of our questions for today. So just to clarify, we will now
Sorry, there's a few
sorry.
questions we have in our chat as well. So let's have a
Oh,
look at those.
let's go there.
Doesn't matter if the admission is 6 months after completing profs. No, 100% not. You've got a time limit, which we've sort of covered there. Parking and speeding fines, nope, they are infringements. They do not need to be disclosed under the fit and proper element. Health in general, so yeah, so it is both physical and mental health. If it's there are some guidelines on our website, so please, they are broadly anything that's ongoing and or reoccurring. Apologies, I don't know what apply to international students. Unsure what that referred to. Apologies. Moving council can be a referee. Yes. Sorry, that last one. I noticed a publication that there are different groups which state what each requires in terms of referees. That might be an old reference to old referee requirements. So earlier this year, I think it was around about March or May, the referee requirements changed where it was quite convoluted previously, where you, depending on your situation, you had to provide different number of referees. That has changed and been simplified in an attempt to reduce the barriers to the profession. So now the requirement is simply, the bare minimum is your current employer and 2 general referees. If we require more to just meet our statutory obligations, we will contact you and advise of that. But at the moment, the requirement is the minimum of 3. Right. So internet apply to additional students and police clearance. Yes, we will. If you have been living in a country, regardless if you're an international student and you were there for more than 12 months consecutively after the age of 18, so not a minor, we would require it. If you're over here studying and you're originally from another country, if you were in that country since for more than 1 year since the age of 18, we would require it from that country. Um, the the key thing to take from that is that from the age of 18. So effectively, if you were in another country as an adult for more than 1 year. All right, so look at some questions here.
The sort of final question that's come through is around certificate of character being the most time constrained. So I think this is referring to the fact that certificate of character has the time validity of 3 months. Have you got any other further comments on that?
So a certificate of character application, the certificate is issued, it's a snapshot in time of your character, and that can change. So obviously, when you submit your application, this is your situation at this point in time. What may change in 3 months, 6 months' time is that you might be charged with a criminal offence, for instance, where that character element may have changed your situation. You may have found something different, or the situation may have changed. So the Law Society is, at that point, is only willing to vouch for your character for the 3 months. And that's 3 month period is where you must make your application to the High Court for admission. So that certificate must be valid on the day. If it's expired, the High Court will probably reject your application.
I think for most people, if we're using the standard approach, is that if you look 3 to 4 months ahead of when your prof's course end date finishes and choose an admission date that aligns there, 3 to 4 months afterwards, all of these processes will all work in tandem together, and you're likely to meet the timelines.
And you can make your application for a certificate of character and your certificate of completion at the same time. They can, because they're dealt with by two different organizations, they can be working in tandem and completely separately.
Yeah. I'm just thinking we might wrap up now and stop the recording, because I think there's a few questions that are coming through that are quite specific to individual people. So we'll wrap up, we'll stop the recording, but then we'll stay online to be able to answer individually questions that people have coming through for a little while. Just wanted to thank you again, David and Danny, for your time. Thank you, Nick, for setting this up. We really appreciate it, and it's hugely informative and so important for prof students that are looking ahead and trying to decipher all the information that's out there. So we appreciate that. I will now stop the recording, and we'll stay on the line for those that want to stick around and ask specific questions.